Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of Into the Rift. As always, I'm your host, Daniel Sifa Dracos. Today, we're going to be talking about IEM Katowice, and I'm joined by, as Froskern would say, a horde of guests. Let's start, of course, with Dom, also known as Kefka, here today to talk to us about Korea and, of course, the exciting performance from the GE Tigers. Yay!
Of, of course.
We've also got dentist, coach for the Copenhagen Wolves, and German caster as well. Apparently, as I just learned.
Fuck no. I'm not Isa. Come on, guys.
All right. We're also joined by Hermit, analyst for Origin, and of course Froskeren, notable Chinese fan. So, that's what you. That's what you asked to be put down as, Chinese fan. Got it. All right.
It's actually on my resume.
Perfect. Well, we're going to go through each team in kind of the order that they were eliminated, kind of, sort of. And how we're going to do it is we're going to look a little bit at their pick ban phase and a little bit at their in-game performance compared to what we expected, compare it to what it maybe should have been in the case of some teams. And, of course, we'll go through. Well, we have a lot to go through. Let's start right off the bat with Cloud9 coming into this tournament. I don't think anyone's surprised when they didn't win IEM, but obviously their performance was pretty lackluster. So, how do we feel about Cloud9? What are the thoughts about how they did in pick ban? Let's start there.
Let's not all talk at once.
All right, let's look. Okay, first game, GE Tigers. Let's make it easy.
What? Okay.
GE Tigers versus Cloud9. Do you think Cloud9 came in with an appropriate pick ban strategy? Do you think they did their research?
It's hard to say, definitely. It's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Does anyone care about Cloud9? I guess is the better question. We're all struggling to come up with terms here because we can skip them.
No, it's just like how are you going to prepare against the G Tigers? Like from what they pulled off in OGN, you kind of don't know what they're going to pull off for IEM, so you can't do a proper picks and ban preparation. You can ban like those cheesy picks, Victor, or like they're not cheesy anymore, Hacker in top lane if you really don't have any practice against it. But besides that, you kind of just have to pray that they don't stomp you in under 20 minutes. And I guess that's what they did. So it was okay.
I think that Cloud9 could have afforded to take a different ban strategy in particular. Like I don't know if the Jono was necessarily warranted. I mean, I guess seeing what Cloud9 ended up drafting in terms of like Kennen mid for high, it looks like it seems like that they were really limited by High's champion pool because they had to ban the Janna to pick the Kennen. And I don't think that they came into the tournament like with their heads screwed on straight.
Well, let's be real. Like Kennen mid lane is horseshit.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
What is it? Just like, okay, so here's my theory with the Kennen mid lane was it's just like just to deal with LeBlanc, right? It's just an easy way to lock down LeBlanc because all you need is a single shuriken to land before you can stun her. Essentially, a shuriken and an auto attack. Like it's in theory like a counter pick, like it gives High a certain degree of safety. Like is that the logic there, or is this pick like as you said, just is it total crap?
I mean, I don't even believe that. Like the Kennen versus LeBlanc LeBlanc definitely can just go in, burst him. Like her chain is still gonna she can be outside of his ultimate and her chain still go off to proc the stun and be safe. Maybe like you've got this miracle scenario.
I was gonna say, like, as Hermit's explaining, like the matchup and the mechanics of the matchup, I'm trying to think about like the itemization of Kennen and see if even that's a viable thing. And obviously, he's not gonna go Athenes for the early MR because he's not a mana-based champion. But he could go Abyssal as well as Hourglass. But still, that's like a hefty amount of gold. It's not really gonna help him in the lane phase unless he rushes the. What did he itemize? Like what
he
was
He rushed Negatron Cloak.
Okay, see, like that makes sense. And did he go into the Abyssal first, or did he just grab the Negatron and try to?
Abyssal. I believe
Abyssal.
Abyssal into Haunting Guys was the itemization. I'm not 100%.
So it could have just been an itemization thing on trying to survive the lane versus like a straight like mechanics.
By the time he purchased the Negatron Cloak, he was already like 0-2 in lane because we got two successful early ganks off on him. I mean, I don't really like the high pick. I don't like the Kin pick at all in this composition, just because I know GE Tigers, they really excel at kiting compositions. High is never going to get a chance to actually have a good ultimate in the team fights.
Yeah, and that's the main reason. Like, you don't pick your mid laner to perform good against the opposing mid laner in lane. You pick him for the composition. And the cannon itself didn't make any sense for me. And the one-on-one matchup against LeBlanc, like, it's discussable if it's a lane counter. Like, for me, it isn't. Like, LeBlanc is so strong. Like, even a cannon, like, on paper, you can lock her down with the ultimate because you only need that one proc from the Shuriken to get the stun off and then kill her with jungle presence. But only because it sounds good in theory doesn't mean you can pull it off at an IEM tournament. And cannon itself is like a shit-tier mid laner. So it didn't work out at all, if you ask me.
Well, and the other thing that puzzles me is that he picked us into Lee Sin, and obviously there's very few characters in the game, Janna, Gragas, et cetera, who can actually knock Kennen away. But I mean, Lee Sin's one of them. So the choice to pick Kennen in when Lee Sin is on the table, like, he has to get the earliest possible hourglass to ever be able to ult into a team.
Well, fight. if we want to talk about like pick ban a little bit more, like their Cloud9's first rotation Rumble Morgana is like not exactly the best thing. Like, G Tigers is not likely to play Morgana. While they are likely to play Rumble, like they last rotationed it almost all the time, and so we could have seen the Lissandra come in for high. We know he plays that.
I mean, we know he plays it, but if there's anything we learned from the Yoi Flash Wolves game, it's that it may not be too well.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have also just gotten LeBlanc instead, because, I mean, that was GE Tigers' last rotation.
Yeah.
So he had two options right there. They didn't take it in the first round.
Well, but as a matter of fact, we shouldn't waste too much time on Cloud9 because, like, after all, there was a shit performance. Like, we couldn't expect, like, a whole lot of them, and what we expected kind of got disappointed anyway. So Cloud9 just didn't perform at all.
Okay, so let's look at their in-game performance real quick before we move on to the next team. Just since we've talked about their pick ban strategy, do we feel like this is standard Cloud9 performance? They just got outclassed. Do we feel like they showed up and they tilted? Like, what happened? They start the first game versus Cloud9 with First Blood, and their early game looks solid. And then I guess Meteos focuses top, which is a really interesting choice against Smeb on Lissandra, and of course Lee gets 2 kills on high in the first 10 minutes, as Dom mentioned earlier. So, I mean, what happened? Did it just go south from here? Was Cloud9 playing well at any point in this tournament?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's probably the right way to approach your lane priorities versus G Tigers in terms of like ignoring Koro, hoping your bot lane goes even, and camping the top lane and keeping Smeb down. Because that's one of the things that worked really well for World Elite, and we'll talk about that later. But they just didn't execute, and by the two deaths in mid lane, like that's a pretty big sign right there.
Yeah. Okay. So Cloud9 shit the bed, got knocked out very quickly, of course, by Yoi Flashwolves, who actually showed up pretty well in this tournament. But let's look at the other team that was almost immediately knocked out, none other than Gambit Gaming. Everybody's favorite. No? All right. Gambit Gaming. Trying to get you guys excited about the teams that aren't so exciting early on. Like, I promised we'll get to talk about GE Tigers. I promise we'll get... I don't even want to say TSM. We'll get to talk about Flash Wolves. We're going to talk about SK. Like, there's other teams, I promise. But we got to get through these ones first.
Well, okay. So I think the most interesting matchup for Gambit was... They played versus World Elite, but they also they lost their first match to CJ, and that was one of those occasions where we saw the TF pick come out, and I know that we wanted to talk about some of the kind of slight meta changes, different things in terms of pick ban that we saw in this tournament, and TF in mid lane is something that I have been seeing quite a bit of recently and across different regions. What do you guys think about that TF pick?
It fit the idea that they were going into the tournament. Like,
yeah.
They wanted to abuse the fact that no one has a fucking idea how to play against a Jarvan in top lane, because usually it's not a very common pick. So they went for full snowball. Like, they picked Lee Sin in the jungle, they picked TF in the mid lane, and they picked the Jarvan in the top lane. if all hit level 6, that's like a huge amount of burst, and you can snowball a single lane pretty damn hard. What they did, I think like Jarvan went like 3-0-5 with like 100% kill participation at one point. That worked out pretty damn well, but they couldn't capitalize from it. They couldn't transit it into the mid game, and like a fat Jarvan didn't bring them anything. So they came into the game with a strategy, and that strategy worked out, but it wasn't the right one.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really a big fan of it. I mean, like, yeah, they had an early game competition. I mean, composition. They needed a snowball, or else, the Juggermauer is just going to get out of control in the late game, which kind of did happen there. But I don't know if I really agree with the Jarvan 4 pick, because it really didn't do much in team fights. It couldn't. You had Lulu Nami. I mean, he was never able to pull off anything successful. He was never able to even touch Kog'Maw. I don't know. And then, like, their bans were... I didn't really agree with their bans. They banned Hecarim Maokai, which is... I mean, those are both champions that Shy does play, but they left Lulu up, and if Lulu is up, it's 100% pick rate for Shy. So it's just... it was a waste of 2 bans.
Yeah, the Maokai, obviously, because you can't burst him down at level 6. Like, even a Lee Sin, a TF ultimate, and then the Jarvan burst doesn't help against the Maokai. And if you get counter-gank in that situation, it can, like, kind of turn around pretty soon. So they wanted to have the Maokai off the table, I guess. Why they banned the Hecarim, I don't fucking know. Like, no idea. It's a common pick for Shy in the top lane, but I would rather have banned the Lulu. I mean, you kind of saw, like, at a certain point, like when the game was like 25 minutes in, they couldn't even kill the Lulu anymore. And in team fight, it was totally useless because they had Lulu and Nami protecting the Kog'Maw, which is like a pretty common strategy. So yeah, it just didn't work out. It was like a pretty bad pick and ban, and then the strategy they went into it, they weren't able to adapt it on the fly. Like when they saw the locks in of CJ, they had to adapt, and they didn't do it. So yeah, congratulations, you lost the game.
I just feel like looking at the picks too, they just set themselves up for failure. I mean, you give them Lulu Nidalee, and you don't see like the Juggernaut comp coming. Like it's pretty obvious at that point. You're picking these 2 champions that are like very powerful early game, and of course Lulu scales into more of that utility role as you move forward, and then of course Ezreal Nami the follow up. Like it's literally they get like the perfect Juggernaut comp, right? Like the double AD. Like you've got things to balance out your early to mid game scaling, and then I mean, Gambit would have had to like push down an inhibitor, I feel like, in the first 15 to 20 minutes to like really, and then like immediately try to close out afterwards. Because the second Ezreal hits any major power spike, or Kog'Maw gets to like team fight appropriately, there's just absolutely nothing they can do.
Yeah.
Did Edward play any that game?
Yep, he did.
They first picked it too, which was kind of weird.
I guarantee you that they thought that the burst damage and the lockdown and the CC from Annie would have been enough to eliminate a Kog'Maw.
Well, and they had this plan of picking the TF and diving the backline with Annie and TF and Jarvan.
Yeah, like they had a plan. They just obviously, I mean, Monty said it on the cast that it just wasn't executed appropriately.
Their plan was to end the game in 18 minutes. Like that's the only valid plan that they could have.
They needed to like wait 2 days, watch the World Elite games, learn how to do it, and then play this comp. The time machine power.
I don't think World Elite's strategy was what won them the game.
Okay, well, let's stop. What's Gambit versus World Elite? That's the next game on the table. World Elite beats them. Of course, looking right at the pick bans right away, obviously we see that Spirit got Rek'Sai, which we've learned is a pretty important aspect of Team World Elite's strategy, if you want to call it that. What happened here for Gambit? Were they just outclassed individually?
I don't know. I think this is another situation where Gambit might have thrown away a ban, like at least one Ezreal. And
they banned Maokai from Aluka, and I feel like banning things from
like
Aluka
back-to-back preparation issues. In all honesty, like the fact that you're not taking away Lulu, which GE has a history of taking that pick, and then you're not going to take away Rek'Sai, like back-to-back. These are 2 really big power picks for 2 really... Now, I'm not going to like say super important teams for World Elite, but obviously for GE. So, and I think this tournament really did show the amount of preparation because I feel like...
Talking about Gambit Gaming right now.
No, I know. I'm talking about Gambit. Like their lack of preparation for allowing Spirit to have Rek'Sai. And then we already talked about like Gambit and their lack of... You know what I'm saying?
No lack of prep for Brian. Well, I just feel like anytime you're banning...
For like the Juggernaut comp.
Yeah. And they banned Annie away. I don't know. It just seems odd to me that you ban things from Aluka. Maybe I'm wrong. Frost, in China, LPL teams, do we see any bans targeted at Aluka?
Mm, no. Well, I mean, they'll always ban top lane champions because top lane champions are hard. But typically in China, the meta is just so different on where they focus their, like where the lanes are weighted and what you're going to focus. Aluka will be dove in China 3 times for the 10-minute mark, whereas a lot of time at IEM when World Elite were victorious, there wasn't a lot of focus up in the top lane against Aluka. He was just kind of allowed to be mediocre.
Yeah.
I love the description of being allowed to be mediocre. I feel like it fits so well. All right. Well, with Gambit behind us, let's look at SK. They started out okay. I mean, they beat the Yowie Flash Wolves, and that's important. We've learned that their Yowie Flash Wolves is clearly a world-class team. They've made it pretty darn far. So once again, pick ban strategy for SK Gaming right off the bat in their first game versus Yowie Flash Wolves. I feel like, I don't know, do we feel like they did their research looking at Nidalee, Maokai, and Ahri as their bans? Or do we feel like this is just like a standard pick ban phrase from SK?
Nidalee's an OP ban. Maokai, I can see. Ahri doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially because of what we saw about Koro's picks the next couple days in terms of like him not prioritizing Ahri at all, and so yeah, I don't think that these are very specific bans for Yowie.
And then, so let's look at Yoey's side of this too. Do you feel like Yoey picked a decent comp for what they wanted to do in this game, or do you feel like to me, looking at this on paper, I feel like SK won in picking bans. Like just looking at it.
The first, I mean, so their plan was pick Caitlyn, put Forgiven on Lucian. I mean, Forgiven has a really predictable pick ban ADC strategy, as I'm sure Dennis can attest to as well. But I kind of question picking the Gnar that early. And in terms of how this game played out, I don't think that Yowie had like a really like there was something going on with their team comp in terms of a cohesive strategy, but then it wasn't like it wasn't the right cohesive strategy for what SK was playing. And I think that part of that is due to what I understand to be their inexperience on the patch, and I think that like the Gnar pick in particular is really indicative of that.
It is interesting to prioritize that over things like Hecarim or Lissandra in general. Rengar jungle is something that I've seen pop up a lot for Yowie Flash Wolves. Is this just a comfort pick in general, or is this something that they've used successfully in LMS, or from what you've seen at least?
It is a comfort pick for Karsa, definitely. That's kind of one of the things that he really broke onto the scene with was the Rengar, and Karsa coming on and having this slightly different, a little bit more aggressive champion pool than Refrain. Refrain was really dependent on Elise. Allowed Yowie to play some of this more like top focus style and really give Stake a little bit more of the spotlight, which is something that we saw a bit from Yowie throughout the tournament, was that Stake was pretty much holding his own.
Okay, that's fair. Yoey's not my realm of expertise, I will say, and while I do appreciate SK, this game just seems like standard SK comp. Give Forgiven Lucian, let him go wild, and I mean he totally did. He absolutely just crushed that game. GE Tigers, though, obviously had a little bit better pick ban strategy coming into this. They took away both Graves and Lucian from him, denying the early game bullies. They took away Lulu as well. And it looks to me like GE Tigers got literally everything they wanted in pick ban phase. Is that...
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all their most played champions right there. I mean, except for Rek'Sai, but I mean, that's just because it's a typical ban against Lee. Then just going on to the bans for SK, like, I mean, the obvious one is the Zed ban. Like, what the fuck is that doing there? That should never be a ban against Koro. He's played competitively for about 2 years now. I don't think I've ever seen him play Zed, ever in 2 years.
I
think
one.
it was 3 games.
Played,
He has 3
played
games.
I remember one game this season, and he kind of shit the bank, if I remember correctly. Like, he wasn't the reason they won the game.
I just I feel like the fact that we're scratching our heads trying to find the Zed game from Kuro might be a good indication that it's a poor ban.
He hasn't even he wasn't the one who played it this season. There's only been 2 players that have played Zed all year in Korea, and that's Goong and Frozen. No one else has even touched that champion. It's not even a pick that you see in Korea right now. So it's just a very bizarre ban to me.
So, watching this game, I mean, it was definitively one-sided. Do you feel like it would have been different, or it could have gone differently for them? Like, is there anything that they could have done? Like, would pick bans could have saved them? Do they need to?
Replace the Z ban with the Victor ban, and GE is forced on Kuro is forced onto like Ezreal. It looks like, and I think that the Victor the Victor pick is really, like, how do I say this? It's just like what GE wants to be playing. Like, it's a mid to late game team fighting pick, great zone. It can zone for your ADC. It fights really well in the jungle. It's just like what GE is like all about. Is this like Victor kind of exemplifies that really well. And if you just replace the Z pick the Z ban with a Victor ban, like GE's comps kind of starts to look a little bit like less scary late game.
Maybe they just haven't encountered a Victor that is like worth banning. Because, quite frankly, like, it's been picked up by a lot of people in the West. Like, you see Victor like in every second game, and it's not that impressive at all. So maybe the SK scrimmed against the Victor a lot and kind of figured that, okay, if we pick this and that against them, that will be fine, and it's not worth a ban. And the Z might be dangerous because I don't know why. Like, because they... Like, as I said, like, there was one Z game this season in LCK where that has been won, and the Z wasn't even the reason for that. It was just kind of like a shit pick, and Kuro is like not dangerous at all. Maybe they were afraid of a Z jungle or a Z top lane. I don't know, because for mid lane it makes no fucking sense. And then they run against the Victor, and against the Victor who actually knows how to play Victor and how to play him in the early game, how to turn it into mid game, and then how to rape people in late. That's just what Victor does, and you saw that, and they weren't prepared for that at all. Also, the fact that Forgiven was put in a champion where he's not that... Like, of course, he's comfortable on Caitlyn. Like, Forgiven is one of the best AD carries in the world, if you ask me, and his champion pool is definitely wider than just the 2 champions.
Yeah.
Like, his Caitlyn is pretty damn fucking good. But Caitlyn is just a champion that doesn't work. Like, if you saw how effective he was in the team fighting situations, although his positioning was quite flawless, Caitlyn is just not a good champion as of right now. There are other picks that are like way more effective. If you put him on Lucian, he's going to carry the game. If you put him on Grace, he's going to carry the game. On every other champion, he's kind of like meh, because it just doesn't fit their playstyle and Forgiven's playstyle at all. Like, and just Caitlyn isn't a good pickup. So that game was doomed to be lost just right after picks and bans.
So something that SK's played in just one of their matches against GE Tigers to start off was Diana mid. And we've seen Diana mid across this tournament, and I know it's popped up in China, but not so much anywhere else at least. Just as kind of a general question, why is Diana mid being picked? Is this an appropriate pick in a Victor matchup? Do we feel like what's causing Diana's resurgence? Obviously, her Pale Cascade, her W had a buff, so that the orbs spin faster, which functionally gives it a lower cooldown if you're in combat. But it's odd to me that this is popping up, and I'm hoping one of our many analysts in this call can explain why Diana is seeing a resurgence.
Well, I have heard that one of the main reasons why people like Diana is because 2-item split push Diana has like 3 bad matchups. I mean, there are some picks that aren't really played in the West that do much better versus Diana early mid, like Cho'Gath, for example. but I think the main reason why people like her is because of that 2-item power spike in terms of split pushing, which if you look at game time, that's going to be about the time that a team like World Elite or SK, for example, they're gonna be wanting to do that 1-3-1 like back and forth on the tier 2 towers in the enemy jungle, and Diana's pretty good for that.
All right. I mean, I'm curious as to. I guess it is just kind of the meta shift, and I guess maybe it's less of Diana being buffed, more as every other assassin being slowly nerfed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I don't understand Diana. Like, for me, it's nothing ban-worthy or pick-worthy at all. But maybe we're just shitters. I don't know. Like, maybe it's just hidden OP. I don't.
Well, okay.
that's like,
Have you played against it in scrims, Carl?
Yeah, we did.
What did you pick against it, if you don't mind my asking?
No.
No. Okay. All right.
But it worked pretty damn good. I can
Yeah,
write
see,
you.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is like I think that there are answers, and the answers to it are pretty damn good. Like, and if you know the answers to Diana.
Yeah, I know. Isn't this unfortunate that there's so much Diana in this tournament, and yet Ninja wasn't playing Master of Cho'Gath, right? Like, this was his tournament to shine, and World Elite just threw it away.
I don't know. I think the Master of Cho'Gath is Wayless, as is the Master of Diana. If you want to see some amazing Diana play, just hit up Wayless. You will be changed by that champion.
All right. There's your LPL plug for the day from Brock. Please, somebody watch LPL. CJ, now that we've covered SK at least briefly and Forgiven's limited capacity to carry a game.
We're doing a lot of talking around teams that don't matter since they didn't make it to the finals.
Yeah, well, we got to go through the baddies first before we get to the good stuff. Before we get to our world champions,
Oh, my
TSM.
goodness. It's cool. I'm just going to sit over here with my thumb up my ass and just wait it out. Call me when you're ready.
It's going to be great. We're going to get to World Elite, and you're going to be so excited to talk. You're going to shower us all with knowledge. And to be fair, World Elite has played in some of these games. You know, we're going to get to talk about World Elite in just a second in their game versus CJ, and you can enlighten us there. But before we do that, let's talk about their game versus Gambit. We talked about it a little bit already. Juggernaut comp for CJ. We'll go over it really briefly since we talked it already. Juggernaut comp for CJ. Failure to execute from Gambit. Is there anything more to say about that game versus?
We finally got to see Ambitions in Italy. That's pretty much all you can say there.
Yeah.
Was it good? I don't remember. I watched this VOD on 2x speed and just watched Gambit do Gambit.
So
things.
it was typical Ambition fashion where he just kind of chilled in the jungle, farmed, got caught a bunch. That's pretty much all he did that game. I mean, he didn't really have too much impact.
Also, I don't really understand why they stick to the Twisted Fate. Like,
Yeah.
has any one of you ever recently seen a Twisted Fate being played to effect at all? Like, I don't even say good effect or just
Yeah.
like.
I mean, how recently are we talking? We got IEM San Jose and the infamous Jungle Twisted Fate.
Yeah, but Kikis is a fucking legend, so we just take Unicorns of Love out of the discussion.
Good on you for not just shitting on that in general. By the way, I was just waiting for someone to rip that apart. But all right, TF. Yeah, I agree completely. We haven't seen TF forever.
I do shit talk TF in mid lane in general. Like, this is just horrible. Like, it kind of made sense for the composition they were trying to run in the first composition, so I kind of let that go through. But in the second, okay, you saw it failed. Like, just don't run with it. Like, especially since Betsy has a champion pool as wide as this house. Like, it's just that guy can play so much. Like, he's a solo queue player. Like, he's a high challenger solo queue player. That guy can play so many champions on the highest mechanical level. Like, why do you put him on fucking Twisted Fate? Like, I don't know.
One day we'll find out. The Gambit pick bans will come out. Leviathan will come out and say he was wrong, that he made a mistake.
He could LeBlanc here. He could have Ari here. He could.
Well, LeBlanc was banned out by them.
Yeah.
Gambit banned LeBlanc in that game.
Oh, we're talking about the CJ game.
Yeah, CJ versus Gambit. Gambit banned it on this.
Okay,
Yeah.
he could have played Ari versus Ezreal. That's great matchup. He could have played Lysandra. That's not taking advantage of his mechanical skill.
Okay. So
Well,
I mean,
it doesn't fucking matter what you pick. Just don't pick
Yeah.
Twisted Fate. Like,
pick whatever you want. Pick Diana. For God's sakes, just don't pick Twisted Fate. All right. Frosk, are you ready?
IMO.
Are you ready?
Hello?
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Have you removed your thumb?
Uh-huh.
World Elite versus CJ. I'm gonna give it to you first. Enlighten me.
You muted yourself.
Did I mute myself?
What would you like me to enlighten about World Elite?
Give us an overview of this game. Explain to me what World Elite did to win this game.
World Elite does the same thing to win any of their games, which was kind of a fluke that they even managed. And the way that I like to explain World Elite, okay, this is like my analogy here. So you have a brick wall. And what World Elite does is they run at the brick wall as fast and as hard as possible. And they hit the same spot over and over and over. Meanwhile, while they're all like smashing into this brick wall because they're just trying to brute force things on these weird skirmishes, Spirit is painting a beautiful picture. Like the most wonderful thing that you could ever imagine, and the rest of World Elite is just smearing their blood all over it. That's honestly what happens in pretty much all of their games. Anytime you got World Elite to group up as 5v5, anytime you got World Elite into like a lane swap situation, and this isn't just like CJ, this is like every single game that they played this tournament, you would see them start to falter. But if you're playing an elongated laning phase where it's just skirmishes and Spirit's running around in the jungle and it's like Spirit, Xie, and you're trying to match up 2v2, that's when shit would go wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't know why teams kept playing into that trap. And why TSM seemed to be the only team like, hey, why don't we try lane swapping against them? Why don't we try grouping up earlier against them? Why don't we try?
yes, thank you. Lane swapping. Like, have you ever seen
I know, right?
performing decently in a lane swap situation? Because I didn't.
It's
like,
awful.
As a matter of fact, they just run around. Like, have you seen when TSM lane swapped against them? Like, I kind of like take something forward. What the Hecarim did in the lane swap, like. Holy fuck. Like, I can do that better. I'm a fucking platinum shitter. Like, come on, dude. Like,
So-
it was so easy to identify. If you just watch, like, 2 or 3 games of them and you watch, okay, do they lane swap in that game? Yes, they do. Was it good? No, it was total horseshit. Can we do it better? Yes, we can. Like, come on,
I don't even think you would need to watch the VOD. You could just look at that and be like, okay, it's a brand new team. They've never played together. They have a language barrier. I bet if we force them into a lane swap where it's all about communication and timing, that they might fuck this up somehow.
As a matter of fact, you just have to watch China Talk once in a while because I firmly believe you have a category called why we should lane swap against World Elite and why they totally suck ass in that situation. Like, and you do this like for half an hour. Like it's
at least once a week.
Yeah.
So CJ decided to ban Rumble against Aluka. Frosk, do you feel like that's a worthy ban?
Well, Aluka is an LPL champion, and you really have to respect him on champions like Rumble. I believe his KDA. I don't even want to pull up that stat. It's like an awful number. No. Yeah, wasted bans. But that's pretty much been the motif of this tournament. I feel like the overarching theme of IEM is preparation. Did you Google someone? Did you watch some VODs?
I do think that the Rumble ban is kind of like, it makes sense because like that Super Galaxy Fire Rumble is kind of distracting from the overall situation. So if you take that off the bench right away, you're kind of good to go. Right?
Shy can't handle the pretty lights. It's too much. He loses focus. He goes on tilt. It's too much.
That's why Shy must have picked Hecarim for the fucking skin. For the Hecarim
exactly.
skin.
To counter the Rumble ban. Yeah. It's pretty flawless.
Science.
This is the most high-level analysis that you could ever get anywhere. And I'm glad that we're expending it on a team like World Elite, who really deserves it.
Thank you.
God.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This is why I love talking about World Elite, is we have to explain to people why these guys win, and the answer is so bad. Spirit painting a beautiful picture, brick walls. But,
no, that fucking works. Like, if you put that team into European LCS, it works. Like, it will work. Like, they didn't win the games because, like, that like they're not total shitters. They're good at what they do, but it's easy exposable, and like no one did it against them but TSM. So
Yep.
TSM is like the only team that kind of exposed their like one of their like million weaknesses and like took away the victory. Like it's as easy as it sounds. Yeah.
Right. Dom, you're a Korea fan. You're a CJ fan, even. I'd be willing to bet. Well, maybe not a CJ fan. You understand what they do. What
The
happened?
proper segue here was to go, you're a GE fan, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Yeah,
trying we're saving GE. GE is a great story of
Okay.
being prepared. I understand that in the limited time that you're here, that you want to talk about everything, but you're the one with the scheduling restrictions. I'm not changing. Dom,
Fine.
tell me about CJ. Tell me what did CJ do? What could have CJ done better? Is it the extended laning phase? Is that where things went wrong? Did Spirit 1v5?
Yeah, I guess I'd go back to start with just picks and bans in general. I mean, this is a CJ. I don't really like their draft at all because they're kind of pretty much copycats of whatever GE does. They just play whatever GE does. I mean, they're just a weaker version of them. And we see Mad Life on an engaged support. Mad Life doesn't play engaged supports this year. He does not play them. He just plays John and Nami. And you could see his uncomfortability on these champions, like engaged supports, because he constantly got picked off for free for no reason at all. I'm not really a big fan of Shai's Hecarim at all. Last time we saw him play it in OGN, he rushed Frozen Heart against a quadruple AP, which is very questionable, I think. I don't know why you would ever do that. I mean, I don't know. They just went back to a style of play that they don't play, and it's just very curious. I mean, yeah, obviously they probably should have lane swapped. You know, these are just solo queue players basically from WE. It was just very poorly played throughout the game.
But there's a pretty simple explanation for the Frozen Heart on Hecarim. Like there was a situation in the EU LCS where like one certain jungler, I won't say any names, like played Nidalee and also built Frozen Heart. And after the game, I asked him, "Why did you buy Frozen Heart?" And he said, "I misclicked." So if you once roll with the item, then you just stick to it. Like because selling, you lose like how much? 50% of it. So just roll with it.
Yeah.
All right. So, just as a, I guess, quick, do you feel like CJ could have won this if it was a best of three? Like, do you think CJ as a team would have figured it out that it was time to lane swap, that it was time to not ban
Dan,
Rumble?
let me throw you some mad statistics down on you. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I'm waiting for your response.
I'm
Okay.
ready. Yeah,
World
I'm here.
Elite made it into the finals with a losing record. Not a losing record domestically. I mean a losing record in IEM. Okay, there's like a pause because people are like trying to figure out what that means. That just it speaks to the format of the tournament. Because like to be frank and honest, there were high caliber teams that attended this tournament. I mean, you have SK, you have GE, you have CJ, you have TSM. Gambit was on a winning streak. I mean, there was talent that went into IEM, but the problem is that the format fucked everyone sideways, like best of ones. Are you kidding me right here? I think if it was a best of three, do you think CJ would have won? And of course you know the answer to that, but like we've kind of been dicking around this this pregnant point that yeah, if it was the best of three, the results probably would have been entirely different if the tournament was just formatted differently. And that like World Elite having a losing record to go into the finals is pretty much the statistic that I'll pull out to illustrate that every single time.
Okay. So we don't like the double elim bracket with best of ones. We're not a fan now. I mean,
That's a nice way to say that.
But hey, some of us have to be a little bit PR oriented. Best of threes forever, right?
That wasn't PR. That was
best of threes. Is that just as a general thing? Everyone in the
well, that
world?
didn't work out for GE, so I guess it doesn't save.
If you do that, you need an additional day or two if you put everything in best of three. And like IEM did it, like ESL is smart at what they do. Like for the game itself, like for the scene itself, best of threes or even like best of fives were better because it brings like a whole new aspect to the game. Like picks and bans actually do matter, and it's not about like preconceived preparation, but about like adapting on the spot. But you kind of have to put in like 2 additional days, and that's 2 additional days of casters, 2 additional days of staffs, 2 additional days of like renting that whole piece of shit, and then kind of you want to have the viewer peak on the finals, so you put that at the best of 5 on the last day, and kind of roll with the best of 1 for the shitty games. So you have to do it. It's just the format.
Yeah.
All right.
I think for the time span that they were trying to fit the tournament into, that this was like the best thing that they could come up with. I in terms of like league format, LCS, like regular season, quote unquote, I'm okay with not having best of 3s, like and having best of 2s, which is kind of what we have right now. But I definitely agree that a best of 1 format is going to give you a little bit of a skewed result depending on your day one and how teams are in terms of arriving there and prep and like how their play style fits into a best of 1 format versus maybe another team. Like, for example, this is if we were to have this tournament a year ago, I mean, maybe not exactly a year ago, but last season, this is a tournament where Samsung Blue could have showed up and not made it through the group stage, which seems like ridiculous to think about, because I think we can all acknowledge that Samsung Blue was very good at what they did last season. But I don't think that this format would have supported their play style at all, and so it's just kind of what it is.
Well, when you put Samsung Blue of last year into this tournament, they would have just shitstormed it like there's no tomorrow. So,
well,
yeah,
I mean,
or
we saw Spirit perform, right? We only needed 1 piece of Samsung Blue to perform at this tournament.
Yeah.
1 piece of Samsung Blue carried an entire team. The legacy of Korea ripped apart, spread across China. No, not a fan. That's a sad face you got on there, friend. All right. We'll come back to UA Flash Wolves. Let's just get to GE Tigers versus World Elite, because I know Frosk is here for a slightly shorter amount of time. I know Dom has a lot to say about this. You're anxious. You want to talk about it.
I'm ready.
Okay. Let's talk this best of 3 series. Once again, you said that the overarching theme was like a lack of preparation or international research. And Frost, let's give it to you. What happened in game 1 when GE Tigers won? Why did GE Tigers win?
GE Tigers played. See, I don't watch Korea, so this is like my really big first experience with GE Tigers and seeing them and what people were telling me what they do. And what I love, though, is the narrative of the GE Tigers is that they over-prepare for every single team that they're going to face, and they always tailor these perfect strategies for everyone. But no, they looked really good in Game 1, and I don't know if Game 2, I'm pretty sure, obviously I wasn't like on comms with them like in their huddle as they were talking about Game 2, but from Game 1, like GE Tigers playing their standard game, it's awesome. Game 2, cockiness. Bring out some weird picks, which obviously if you're going to flex on someone, game 2 in a best of 3 is when you're going to do it, because you can try to go for the snowball there. But then obviously for game 3, and I want to call you Kefka, Dom. Dom, like, am I understanding this right? Like, would you agree that this was like a mental thing, a mental shift when World Elite really started to take power, or do you want to put it? Because I mean, we can go down and we can break in like the picks and bans and things like that. But my core thing is, I honestly think that it probably was a mental thing, almost in a majority of it.
Yeah, especially like game 3 was really, they kind of just went on tilt like midway into the game, maybe a little bit more earlier on, but. Yeah, it was just very awkward because, like, the one thing, like, as you say, like, GE Tigers always tailors, a specific strategy. Like, we saw this against SK earlier on in the group stages where they did the whole, with the Maokai, he got blue buff, stopped the fast push from the Caitlyn, backed, got double door, and pretty much just negated, Forgiven's early game power spike on the Corki. Their lane swapped back right when Corki hit 6, so he wasn't abused by the Caitlyn. I mean, we see things like this all the time, but WE, there's not really much you can research on them. They're pretty much, you guys called them team solo queue, if I remember correctly. I mean, there's not you have a few games to go off of, but there's just not enough. And so I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
Are
Well,
you
I was
using that
gonna
as an
s-
excuse for them? Like that
No. I
that
mean,
there wasn't a track record that put GE at a disadvantage?
No. I mean, GE. I mean, let's be honest. Like GE should have just 2-0'd him. If it was a best of 5, they should have 3-0'd him. Best of 7, they should have fucking 4-0'd him. I mean, there's no excuse really for this. Game 1, I don't know if I entirely agree with the Diana ban. I don't think it's really worthy of a ban,
Not at all.
especially since he just takes TP. I mean, there's not really. He was very hit or miss with his TPs. It was just an unjustified ban, especially if you look at his solo queue account. I think LeBlanc's his most played champion.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was that thing. Sivir, that was fine. As for their picks, I mean, they actually had a pretty good, strong comp in Game 1. Game 2, I don't really know what the fuck their comp was. I honestly think that was just some sort of homage to Samsung Blue. I mean, if you really look at that comp, it's a Samsung Blue comp, all their most played champions.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know if
from
there's
last
some.
season. But from
Yeah,
last
yeah,
season,
exactly.
where Yasuo
Like,
actually worked.
exactly. So I don't know if it was some next level BM they tried to do on Spirit in that game. I don't know. I mean, Yasuo makes no sense.
I like
When
that
you-
we've
when
got
you
to the
look
point.
at it.
Where, go ahead.
No. You went first. So.
I just like that we've gotten to the point where the theory as to why GE Tigers picked what they did is next level BM. Like no one in their right mind is trying to justify a
is.
goddamn Yasuo pick this season.
It is. No. It is next level troll because in the first game was like practically flawless execution. Okay, mid lane was a bit shady. Like if you put a LeBlanc against an Ezreal, then you kind of expect that the LeBlanc can shit stomp that idiot if he plays it wrong. And he kind of went into cocky into that matchup, got punished for it, and then snowballed with it. But that one team fight that they had at the bottom position, like you kind of give GE Tigers a finger and they take the whole hand. Like it was just snowbally after that, perfect rotations. Like when you had to cast that game, everything you like, basically everything you could do was just like predict where they come from, and then like do it, and they're gonna do it. So there was flawless execution. Second game, it was just next level BM. They went for the Ezreal mid lane, and for whatever reason, the lead picked it for AD carry. I don't think Ezreal is a strong AD carry, but he didn't get punished for it, so it's all fine. And then there was like, okay, what do we pick now? Should we pick something that makes sense or just Hasaki? And then they went for Hasaki and just got ruffle stomped with it because that pick doesn't make any sense. It's not valid. Like it doesn't work. The composition wasn't built for it. Like, okay, it could work last season with it, but it was just total horseshit this season. It was way too cocky, and they got punished for it. Third game, come on, they tilted. I mean, honestly, that was just plain
There were so many plays in Game 3, specifically with Lee, where he was just doing really just random stuff. Like there was one point where I still remember where WE was pushing down mid turret. Lee is randomly ganking the tier 2 mid turret. Lee is randomly going to gank the Hecarim goes to gank the Hecarim. WE gets tier 2 turret, and then they rotate, go straight to Dragon. So they give up a turret tier 2 Dragon for nothing. Like it was just really random stuff. There was one play where Lee Sin just randomly kicked somebody in a team fight despite Yasuo. Oh wait, that was a different game. That's Game 2. I mean, it was just tilt fest. Lee just nonstop ganks top lane. I don't know. He didn't gank any other lane except for Smeb's lane. For some reason, they viewed Hecarim as a threat, which Hecarim's itemization this game was actually quite weird. He went for the standard Merc Treads with home guards. That's standard. Phage. Then he got Spirit Visage, which was really random. I don't know what the plan was there.
Are you questioning Luca?
I am questioning that LPL champion. I am. I'm sorry. Hecarim didn't even finish.
Calm down.
Hecarim didn't even finish his Trinity Force that game, which is like, why are you ganking a Luca? Like Smeb's gonna do fine against him anyway.
That fucking Hecarim item build was just fucking beautiful.
Yeah,
he was like 4 levels behind, and he had like a fucking Phage where the Maokai was just like a 3 tank items. I just was like, what the fuck are you doing there? Like, mate, come on.
So I want to piggyback on what Dom said about the Diana ban and say that I think World Elite came into it with a really good strategy in terms of identifying what Kuro was going to be on if they banned out the Victor the Lysandra and the Lulu, and I actually feel like World Elite had a really good pick ban in game one, and that the fact that GE just like rolled them made them increasingly more confident than they would have been if World Elite hadn't had such a good pick ban. I mean, Maokai and LeBlanc are both pretty good picks against Rumble. Callista is actually one of the better ADC picks against Rek'Sai. And so World Elite had this comp that theoretically could do really well against what GE picked. They just had their standard like pretty much their standard picks like Rumble, Ezreal, Janna, Corki. Like this is what those players are known for. And so World Elite really, I think they had a pretty good comp going into that game, and the fact that GE just rolled them gave them much more confidence than they would have gotten. I mean, that was the game that like Spirit 3-buffed them, and then World Elite took a bad fight at bot tower, and like they all came in 1v1, like they were up 5-3 at that point, I think. And I don't know if you guys, how many of you have listened to the interview with that Spirit did after that game, but he talked about how after game one, World Elite identified that they had done really well in the early game, and they had done really well in the early game, game one, and then that is what they wanted to play for the rest of the series, and they, in terms of transitioning that what they identified in game one into the rest of the series, game two they actually didn't do so well in the early game. In game one they had really led up to about 15 minutes into the game. And then that was when they like threw a bot tower, gave up the dragon, gave up all of that shit, and just like lost the game. But in game two, Spirit actually didn't make any moves besides the early dragon at 7 minutes and at 14 minutes. Before 15 minutes, they just like, I think it was an even game 0-0. And in terms of game two and game three, World Elite just played like this really dragon focused team play where G just let them essentially get every dragon. From 7, 14, 21, 28, like that was game. Like they didn't do GE didn't do anything to recognize like what was going on in this series, like where they had faltered, what they needed to what weaknesses they needed to shore up going into the next game. And I think World Elite showed a much better adaptation during the course of this series, and that's the reason why they came out the victor.
Is this normally a thing we see from GE, just in general for anyone? Does GE welcome back? Is GE usually a team good at adapting, or are they like, is that narrative that people are pushing where they're the team that does so much research to prepare for games? Like, is that their strength, that they do research well, not that they adapt well?
Well, I mean, the thing about adapting, you normally have to adapt after a loss. And the thing about GE Tigers, they don't really lose too much. You just run the same comp that you ran last game and win again. Like they really went kind of unchallenged to a certain degree in Korea. So they're not used to losing in a series. So there's not much adaptability that you can really do in that situation.
And I suppose I see that. So do you think now things are going to start changing for GE just as like in a general future sense? Like, or are they just going to go back to Korea, continue to stomp? I mean, what's going to happen to GE?
I mean, when I look at the team still in Korea, they're definitely the best still. SK's T's on the rise, but GE's still better than them at the moment. It's hard to say exactly what's going to happen for them. I imagine they just continue their dominance. They're used to the best of three format. We're just going to have to see how much they improve until the MSI tournament. If meta shifts affect them at all, I mean, it's really hard to tell because this is such a new team that kind of just came out of nowhere. I mean, yeah, it has a lot of veterans, but we just really don't know enough about them at the moment as a team.
Just for me personally, how do you feel about Lee as a jungler?
So, I mean, obviously the Korean exodus was not good for Korea. You look at how many junglers they lost. They lost the 4 best Korean junglers, which were Dandy, Spirit, Cao, Swift. And then you add on top of that, they lost Rush, they lost Beast, they lost Rainover, they lost Horo, they lost Daydream. I mean, that's like almost 10 junglers I probably just listed there. I don't really know on the top of my head. Lee was last time we saw him, he was playing in Najin Blacksword in summer season. He was terrible. He was just shitter. I mean, he was not good at all. Now he's the second best jungler in Korea. Like, there's just no talent in Korea in the jungle position. He's not good. The only thing he really does in the game is pretty much just heavy gank top lane, just ganks Smeb until he gets fed. That's pretty much his in-game strategy. You look at the series against WE, one of the underlying themes was they didn't deep ward whatsoever. He was not a part of that. You need to mitigate Spirit's impact in the game. Deep ward, know his position on the map. This was not something that he contributed to at all. Overall, yeah, he's good in Korea, but internationally speaking, he's average at best.
Damn. Average, the best. It's an interesting year when the best team, the jungler from the best team in Korea, is average at best on an international.
I was maybe a little too harsh because I'm kind of sore loser after the series. But I mean, he's definitely probably better than average. But at the moment, I'm going to say average at best just because he pissed me off this series.
Yeah, on Korean standard, like for Korean standards, average at best, like not for overall standards.
Yeah. I mean, when you compare him to Dandy, Swift, Cao, I mean, he's not comparable.
Swift is hard carrying his team in the LSPL, like hard carrying.
I mean, they just beat OMG recently in Demacia Cup or something.
Yeah, it's dumb how good he is. Carl, you talked about the Yasuo pick, and I really feel like compositionally that was one of the reasons why, like, the biggest reason why they lost game 2. I mean, we can harp on it and beat a dead horse so many times, but if you go back and watch that game, if they had had any sort of wave clear from their mid laner, they could have extended the game, and then it would have been a 2-0. Like, it was just idiotic to pick a mid laner that didn't have any wave clear against a team that is going to try and press an early advantage and beat you before you hit your mid to late game power spike. And I feel like that's a huge oversight. You could pick anybody, like Cho'Gath, Morgana, like anybody who can clear a wave at level 9, like anybody.
Yeah, and even that late game power spike is questionable. Like even that is questionable. Like even if you get Yasuo to a point where he hits late game, I doubt that he's able to fucking carry the game alone. Like that's just not gonna happen. Like the composition was just horseshit in general. You saw a couple of times he tried to wave clear where he eat in and queued with AoE. It just didn't work. Like the Cutlass first. The Cutlass first was horseshit.
Yeah, he didn't have
for me.
He didn't have static shiv until like 27 minutes or something.
I mean, the champion got worse, and the champion was valid because you had that incredible early power spike with a static shift. And then he comes into a tournament, plays Yasuo, a champion who's like off the meta, and he builds like a fucking Cutlass first. It was just horrible overall. Like,
all I have to say is that if he had picked any wave clear mid laner, anybody, then they could have. Then GE had the tools to win the game. And because he picked a mid laner that didn't have wave clear at all, they just were forced to like sit there and just lose towers essentially to this like Ari Ezreal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but last year Ari versus Yasuo was like a skill matchup. It wasn't like 100% into favor of one or the other. And
no, you're correct.
And this game, it was so clearly seeable that Yasuo couldn't even though he had like perfect play in lane, like he abused the mispositioning of the Ahri in the early game, and even though he did that, he was not able to like have any sort of impact onto that game. So I don't know, dude. Like we can discuss about that game and about the deep warding and about the lack of warding as long as we want to, but the composition was just total troll and BM.
Yeah. All right. Well, BMing aside, some teams still had to. Some teams took these games very seriously. Let's jump back to the group stage real quick. We're going to talk about TSM. Everybody's favorite team. IEM World Champions TSM. Number 1 in NA. Number 1 in our hearts. Okay, I hate this team still. But they did good, and they beat World Elite in their first game of the split, and it seems to me like they had World Elite figured out from day one or from game 1. Is it correct to say that, Frosk? If you're still with us, do you feel like TSM strategy at the beginning just?
TSM, their history with preparation is fairly interesting. I think it was definitely clear that they had World Elite figured out as well as the majority of their opponents. But I think the big thing about TSM is not necessarily just preparation against their opponent, but TSM really understands how their team works. And I think that makes them incredibly potent, and why they're, or I guess always have been one of the dominant teams from the Western world, and probably the most dominant team right now in the Western world, or at least a contender for that title. And I know that TSM, they've said in the past, or how they go about games is they're much more internally focused as opposed to over denial.
What do you So, I mean, just jumping around here, they played their next game against CJ and, of course, beat out CJ as well. What do you think is the key to TSM's victory in this tournament overall? Like, what picks made TSM work? What is the secret behind TSM, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
Bjergsen.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. When Amazing left, it was kind of, they announced Centaurian as the new jungler. Everyone was like, oh my fucking god, like, I don't know if that's the right move. Amazing was a good jungler and mechanically stronger than Centaurian, and Centaurian hasn't proven himself. That guy has amazing synergy with Bjergsen.
Yeah.
You could see that in the NA/LCS throughout the whole season, and you could see it in that tournament. And then their opponents did that thing where they gave Bjergsen the champions he wanted to play. And if you do that, then you can be named whatever you want to. That guy is going to perform. And if the rest performs well as well, like that one game, like where Wild Turtle stepped up huge on Lucian, I mean, come on, like it was just you can think about TSM what you will, but that was a pretty good performance overall. And the reason why they won was primarily like the flawless play of Bjergsen. He just put on a performance that was like world class.
Yeah.
Of course, he's Danish. Like, what do you expect?
Is it possible to ban out Bjergsen? Like, if you're spending bans on TSM, is it worth trying to ban out Bjergsen?
No, Bjergsen, the beauty of Bjergsen is that you can't ban him out, but you have to ban him. Like, as he performs right now, if you didn't ban Zed, he will just insta-lock that motherfucker into every champion, and he will perform. Like, he will win on that champion, no matter what, because he's so strong. Like, the one game where I think he's got like the last 6 or 7 times where he got his hands onto Zed, he got the first blood in lane 1-on-1. Yeah. I think some crazy stat along those lines. I didn't watch it up, but I just have it like in my memory from his matches that he played. Like, that is just a crazy statistic. Like, and at IEM, people still gave him the Zed. And then they wondered, oh my god, he's actually like a pretty decent Zed, and he can kill me 1-on-1 in lane. Well, what a fucking surprise. Like, really, you can't ban him out, but you kind of have to put bans on him in order to not get destroyed, like, from the get-go.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of a player that is an assassin specialist that has a deep pool, is that they're always, like, this is a player like somebody like Peke or somebody like Febivin. Maybe you could even put Ryu in this if you consider Ryu. Some people think he's a utility player. That's why I say. But they're always going to have that one assassin or that 2 assassins in the meta that you just can't let them have, and that frees up so much room in terms of ban picks for your team to have a player that is always drawing a ban. And interestingly enough, I feel like when Yowie didn't ban against TSM in game 1, that was actually they didn't ban out one of Bjergsen's champions. That was actually the game they won, where they prioritized Vi Santorin's ganks on mid lane through banning Vi. They hit Wild Turtle with the Sivir ban, and then the low farm style of Dyrus with the Rumble ban. And I think when you have I think Carl's totally right. Like, when you have a player like that, you can't give them their best champion. In that particular game, Flash Wolves took away Zed first rotation. But
since we're talking about TSM, I have one question. I don't remember what game it was anymore, but it was the scene where Dyrus was face checking the red buff bush, and face checked 2 people and then flashed into the Baron pit where Centaurian and Bjergsen was waiting. Do you have that scene in mind?
Explain it again.
Dyrus was face checking the bush at their red buff. He was invading solo the jungle level 1.
Yes.
And then he face checked 2 people and forced 2 flashes into the Baron pit.
Yes.
Was that the most brilliant level 1 in the history of League of Legends, or was it just
Irish things?
Yeah, because I couldn't figure out.
I think it was nerves, to be honest. Like,
you think so? Because I rewatched the scene a couple of times, and Centaurian and Bjergsen were actually waiting in front of the fucking Baron pit just for the flash. Like, I do believe that was like the most brilliant level 1 ever, because he did that in the games before, and he was like failing miserably because like just Dyrus things, and then they pulled up this shit. I mean, talking about Dyrus, you can trash talk him as much if you want to, but in a couple of games he fucking stepped up. Like, he gave his team the room that they needed. So, yeah.
And I want to look at Wild Turtle on Sivir and Sivir on TSM in general. It seems like every time Wild Turtle gets his pick that they're going to win. Wild Turtle's damage output is always absurd. He plays his character. It seems it always appears really proficient. I feel like he's a pretty solid Sivir player. Do you think the Sivir pick overall just gives utility to the rest of his team and allows them to perform, or is Wild Turtle like the Sivir god? Like, I mean, why do they keep picking Sivir? And do you think it's a ban-worthy choice?
I personally think Sivir is the best AD carry for certain sorts of team comps, especially the types that TSM was picking this tournament. And Sivir is a champion that really enables the types of junglers that Santorin wants to be playing, in terms of Vi, in terms of Jarvan, in terms of Rek'Sai. Maybe not in Italy so much, but also Sivir is also one of the only traditional ADCs, like probably the most utility-oriented ADC that's good with Lulu, that's good with kind of supportive staff. I just feel like that TSM did the best. Like that's what they needed at the very end of the day. And Corki worked okay, but it's not as easy to build around Corki.
Okay, open question to everyone.
TSM is a Chinese team.
I
mean that in the reference to the sorry, my Skype is like weird, so you guys like speed up and slow down, which is why there's probably these awkward pauses between me and you guys. TSM is they're like a Chinese team. They're team fight oriented. How they set up their compositions usually relies on that. Their lane phase, it's kind of like for a long time, if TSM didn't win the lane phase, that they were going to struggle late. But they usually win their lane phase, and then from there it's just like a snowball. So Sivir is going to work really well for them because she really helps teams that like to team fight a lot. And likewise, if you look at NA as the powerhouses just historically, not necessarily this most recent season, but like it's always been Cloud9 and TSM, and Cloud9 was known as the analytical, strategic, rotation-based team, and TSM was like that mechanic, brute force, team fighting, superstar team. And so, like, this is why I call TSM like a Chinese team, is they do kind of what the Chinese do, and they rely on Sivir in very much the same way. And Sivir is going to buff not only their team fighting, but she's also going to make up for their I don't want to say bad, because people will say, I just want to say not amazing, like, wave management and rotations. And so I think that not only does Turtle have a really good performance on that champion, but it means so much more for TSM as a team just because of their style.
Also,
and Sivir's the AD carry with the most utility that pushes the hardest. Corki wave clears pretty hard, but he doesn't push as hard, like on towers, taking towers and stuff like that, as hard as Sivir does. Sorry.
Also, when you only have one pair of carry pants and you have to put it on one of your players, and you have Bjergsen in your team, you got to put that pair of pants onto Bjergsen. So what are you going to do with Wild Turtle? Like, you put him on Sivir. Like, he can't fuck it up. Like, there's no way you can fuck up a Sivir. It's like utility-based, the ultimate is team beneficial. It's pretty safe in lane, and that's pretty much important. And it just boosts what Bjergsen and Lustboy can do with the team. Like you just focus Santorin on whatever lane needs the most help. You let Bjergsen do his thing, and you put Wild Turtle on Sivir. Like it's just what you do. They are not reliant on an AD carry who carries 1v9 into the late game. Like they're just not. So they want a team fight. They have a mid laner who's like a hard carry. So Sivir is just a perfect pickup for them.
So let's look at TSM's before we go to the grand finals between them and World Elite, which I think will be a pretty short conversation. Given that we basically we've already had the conversation. You broke down the team for us and you told us what TSM did. You skipped ahead. Don't be surprised. TSM, Yowie Flash Wolves. The first game, Flash Wolves managed to take it. Hermit, you talked about how they didn't worry about banning out Bjergsen and instead focused on. Obviously, they took Zed away in first rotation, but they just focused more on taking Dyrus out of the picture, taking Turtle out of the picture, taking Santorin. Do you think this is, in general, the ideal pick ban strategy to bring out against TSM? If your mid laner can play Zed, I guess is the caveat.
I think what hindered Yowie in these games was stake to some extent. I mean, I have been quoted as saying Stake is a poor man's Dyrus, and so I kind of consider them pretty equivalent players. But I think that, so in games 2 and games 3, when game 2, Yowie first picked they kind of tunneled on this Corki pick. And TSM did a really good job of adapting to what Yowie was allowing them to do in terms of leaving Bjergsen's pool open in game 2 and game 3, and they were just playing this hard engage comp into Rengar, into Janna. Sword Art is known as one of the best peeling supports in Taiwan, and he doesn't play characters like Annie, and so it was just kind of an open pick for solo mid. Yeah, I don't know if I made much sense, but
no, I mean, it does make a lot of sense. Do you think putting Stake on Aurelia was at any point the right choice? If he really is like the poor man's Dyrus, do you think it makes sense to have him play that?
I mean, not really. I know that there are people that value Aurelia's position in the meta, especially against AP top laners, but I think that no, I'm not a big fan of the Aurelia pick. Especially, I don't think Aurelia Rengar is a really good top jungle combo, and I think it leaves a lot to be reckoned with. Like Aurelia's weak; she's not going to do anything. Rengar needs to like jungle until level 6. Like you're counting on your LeBlanc to solo carry the early game, especially when you have a lane like Corki Janna. I don't think that the Aurelia pick was good at all.
Okay, for sure. Well, Yowie Flash Wolves, it seems to me, do you think Yowie Flash Wolves would have fared? I guess that's a little bit too much of a hypothetical. Was Yowie Flash Wolves outclassed or outpicked?
I think that they came into the tournament with a less of an understanding of the meta, and I also feel like that they weren't able to really play to their style because they didn't understand how the early game was going to play out in terms of the jungle picks. And the fact that Karso was falling back on this Rengar, which is, it's his comfort pick, but it's not really what was effective in this tournament in terms of like you needed to make a play before level 6. And while you can do that with Rengar at level 4, level 3, level 5, for a counter gank, it's just really difficult, especially versus Fire, versus Lee Sin, versus Rek'Sai, and yeah.
All right.
It's kind of my thoughts.
That's fair. So now we get to the grand finals, the moment everyone's been waiting for. Chinese champions and gods, World Elite, and of course North American Pride and Hope, TSM. I'm trying to sell this narrative, but it's really hard. God, I don't have a whole lot to say about this series. Does anyone have like any stellar insight into what happened outside of, hey, it turns out when you lane swap on World Elite, they kind of suck?
Well, that was exactly what I said. Like I was sitting there with Nif, and was like, okay, if TSM lane swaps, it's gonna be a 3-0 series. If they don't, might be a close one. And he was just, yes, that pretty much sums it up. Let's go into the game. Like the fuck are you even like? Don't try to analyze this. Like I don't even know why they didn't lane swap. They had the perfect setup in both games for it, and they just didn't do it. And then in the third game, you kind of saw what impact it had. Like they took out the top laner completely, like 100%. That was just non-existent. And TSM overall just put on a pretty effectful performance there. So clean 3-0, and yeah, that's about it.
I think it comes down to the fact that WE really sucks at team fighting.
Welcome our surprise guest, Kelsey Moser, who apparently swapped out as Frost had other things to attend to. Welcome. I'm sure Nugan will update the overlay in a second, so welcome everyone. Welcome Kelsey,
Hi.
chat, everyone here. I'm glad to have your insights now. Frost gave me a very brief summary of World Elite's play style, which is, I guess, most of 4 members of World Elite ramming into a brick wall repeatedly while Spirit paints a beautiful picture and then they spill blood on it, I think was the analogy. I mean, how do you feel about that summary, and what are your thoughts on this final best of 3?
It's fairly accurate. I think that WE typically has played a little bit differently in LPL, but this time they had a mid laner who plays like more of the assassin style that's become really, really popular. In terms of the Ahri, all of their mid laners play Ahri. Like people say, oh no, you can counter pick it with LeBlanc. No, just play it. Whatever, no one cares. But that's so they decided, okay, we can play this. Spirit is like very big on the Jarvan, and the reason why they picked the Jarvan, I think, is overlooked because Jarvan splits up the team fights, so they don't actually have to team fight. They can actually use the Cataclysm to create these choke situations where when TSM or any team tries to flank them for a team fight, they can actually cut off half of the flank with the Cataclysm. So they don't want to team fight with it, so the armor nerfs don't really matter, unless, of course, Spirit gets caught out at the beginning of the fight continuously, because TSM knows that that's what they're trying to do. But they use this Jarvan Ahri combination, which is actually something that you'll see that's really common that OMG uses really well in their games. If you watch LPL, you watch a lot of Jarvan Ahri games. So I think they were trying to, and OMG isn't really a big team fighting 5v5 team, so I think WE, knowing that none of their players are really excel in the team fight, like Luca's claim to flame was always, I'm just going to be okay in lane, and I'm going to do well. And this is what he did on Positive Energy. She has had always these explosive laning phase in LSPL, and then he was really underwhelming in LPL because you have to team fight well to do well in LPL. But none of those players really team fight well. So I think TSM could identify that they were playing these really fast compositions with the Sivir to upset the GE Tigers. And then as a result, TSM said, you know what, maybe if we just slow them down and we can force them into situations where they have to team fight, they might suck at team fighting. And hey, they sucked at team fighting. Luca was continuously running out in front of other members of the other team members, so instead of just being a tank, like they could just get picked off. Shia used all of his bursts continuously on tanks in fights. Like, I have no idea what they were doing. It was really awful. Never a team fight ever again, and that's pretty much the summary of WE right there.
How would you so I was thinking of an interesting comparison last night. How would you compare Ziyi and performance on WE at this IEM and Jiyoung's performance with OMG at the World Championships?
Shia versus
I mean,
Jiyoung.
you kept comparing OMG to World Elite when I talked to you about this tournament and this matchup and stuff, and I just think it's a pretty apt comparison where you have a mid laner come in who's kind of a one trick pony. I mean, Ji Young is the obvious Syndra one-trick pony that nobody really knew how to deal with. But do you think it's an apt comparison or not so much?
I think you can kind of force the comparison in that I think that Shia has actually a large champion pool, but he doesn't know how to do the thing that his team needs him to do with the champion pool, if that makes sense. So he doesn't know how to team fight on any of the champions he plays, but he knows how to lane really well. He knows how to always get like the minion advantage. He knows how to get the solo kill. Like, so you can kind of make that comparison, or there's this very easy way to deal with him. And then in his LPL career, because when WE Academy was in LPL, he went like 11 and 1 and 11 in terms of he won one game in 12 games that he played in LPL. So that's because he would win lane almost every time, but like he and WE Academy could not team fight. So
or win pick bans. I missed that team. That was a great. It was a great. I miss old World Elite pick ban phases. That's when you first introduced me into China. That's when you first introduced me into China as like the worst pick ban phase of all time, and it still makes me chuckle.
With Dade, was this the Dade game? Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Dottie game.
Yeah,
where he counter picks himself.
Shia has been benched twice for Koreans now, so it's
a hard
fun fact.
All right, so TSM wins 3-0. They are now IEM champions, IEM world champions, nonetheless. So now that TSM's the world champion, I mean, who's the best region? Has this changed anything? What are our opinions? Or is it still Korea and China at the top, and then kind of everybody else? I mean, is NA now the new gods of League of Legends? I mean, I guess what is the impact of this tournament on the scene globally? Is there any? What is the relevance of this tournament in the big picture?
I think TSM proved their best of chops. I think that they showed that they can perform all right. They have a staff that does something in a best of series and adapts and they can learn their opponents and win after a loss in a best of series. And so I think that gives them good merits on a global scale in terms of how this changes the landscape of the scene and how NA, Korea, China, EU all match up with each other and our ideas of who's better than who. I don't think we really learned a whole lot, and as Frost mentioned before, I think a big reason that why we didn't learn a whole lot is because of the best of format, or the best of format. We had the best of ones all day one.
And when it gets down to it, who did TSM beat in this tournament? Like, of the people that they were supposed to beat,
exactly.
They were supposed to beat WE. They were supposed to beat UA Flash Wolves. The only team they really weren't supposed to beat was CJ. I mean, honestly. And they beat them in one best of one, right? So
yeah.
They did well, and they prepared, and I think this was like the best prep I've ever seen out of them at an international event. But I don't think I'm ready to declare them the best team in the world, based on beating CJ, which frankly GE Tigers does that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, coming into this tournament, I didn't really have much expectations for CJ Intis. Like, I don't even know if CJ Intis was technically the favorite coming in against TSM. I mean, honestly, I see that as a 50-50 game. I mean, as for the world standings, I don't think it really changes too much. I mean, GE Tigers losing to WE. I mean, there's a reason why that's called an upset. It's not it doesn't suddenly mean the 12th best LPL team is suddenly better than the Tigers. I mean, yeah, maybe China might be the best region now. I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say. GE Tigers top 3 still, I would probably argue. Maybe you guys have different opinions. I'm not sure.
I mean,
but I don't really think much changed. The problem with this is, you think about it, IEM Worlds is 1/3 of our international tournaments, and the format here just isn't fantastic. I mean, even the teams invited, specifically with the Chinese teams, so, you got WE. I mean, there's not much conclusions you can really come up with and make after this tournament. I mean, I guess really you just got to wait till MSI and go from there.
I mean,
So
I agree. I don't think this tournament means a whole lot. I think the format didn't help it, and I think more than anything, the teams invited does improve a whole lot. And I think if GE Tigers had swept through World Elite, like, it wouldn't even be a question. It would just be like same old, exactly what we got, and they didn't. And I think the only reason that this question comes up and I ask it is because, I mean, obviously World Elite, TSM first off won an international tournament, good for them, and also World Elite beat GE Tigers, which I think are the two talking points of this entire tournament.
I'm going to make a bold statement. Yeah, I'm going to say if H2K would have been part of the tournament, they would have won that. Just from seeing what TSM's playstyle is and how they played the games out, it was kind of like, I wouldn't say too static, but it was foreseeable. And if you put H2K into that tournament, they're going to win it. GE Tigers as a team, still top 3. Like, I can only agree. Like, it's still a top 3 team in the world. They were just like, they were thrown out of the tournament because of pure and bland arrogance. And then they kind of tilted because they realized, okay, we can't just go full like BM. We have to actually try hard a bit to win this shit. And TSM just played out. Like, first of all, they're prepared for a tournament, which is a good thing. Like, it seemed like they prepared for a tournament, and that's awesome. Like, good for them. And they played pretty solid. They have great individual players, so it doesn't come to a surprise. And Sheena was like, come on, Team World Elite was part of the tournament and representing China. Like, really? Really?
It's just,
if you put a top 3 team of the LPL into that tournament, every single one's going to win that thing, like, without question.
Yeah.
I think I even think I'm even more inclined to give GE better benefit of the doubt, because I feel like they prepared for their strength is in their prep, very much so, and it was very clear they did not prepare for WE. It would be really hard to prepare for WE. So if you're taking like what I consider the GE Tigers' greatest strength out of the picture, they're suddenly this team of frankly mid-tier Koreans. I mean, I don't want to be too mean, but I think that the only thing that I can really take from this tournament in terms of the Korea versus China debate is that the Exodus hurt the Koreans a little bit more than we had anticipated. But that's really all that I can take from it exactly. It's just that on like individual skill. And I might say, because I think EDG is advanced very strategically, like you look at this team and they look really, really solid. Like last year you asked me and there was no Chinese team that I would tell you, like with a straight face, looks like they could strategically like win something. That they would actually show up. I didn't think EDG would do that well at Worlds. And they didn't. I thought they'd do better than they did. I thought maybe OMG had some good legs on them, but I don't think I've thought this highly of a Chinese team since WE in 2012, like as EDG looks right now. So that's the only reason why I might give them the edge over GE right now. But I think GE probably like second best team in the world still at the very least.
And I'm interested to see. I think MSI, as Dom said, is just going to be the big thing, right? Like, everyone's waiting for MSI, our first non-Worlds international tournament, where we actually are going to have legitimately, or at least it would appear legitimately, the best team from each region. Obviously, World Elite qualifying from a previous IEM event where they were. I mean, that whole thing.
If you talk to some people on Twitter, WE's gonna win LPL, guys. Come on.
And I've heard that they're just gonna fly up the Chinese power rankings on all sports. I've heard they're number 1 now. That's it's not out yet, but I've heard.
Yeah. And if you trust Reddit and Twitter, TSM is actually an American team. So.
I mean, they live in North
Shouldn't have laughed
America.
that hard.
That makes them. I mean, isn't that?
So
okay.
are we a German team then? I'm just curious.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those weird things on how do you define it. But either way, TSM won. They get to enjoy the limelight for a little while. All the TSM fans get to appreciate the victory. Whether or not it's means too much, obviously, is well, we pretty much said it doesn't mean anything. So I guess in that sense, it kind of sucks for TSM. But overall, still pretty solid. Before we close out tonight, I think there's a number of people here who have to do shout outs or promos for content that they have coming out. And Dom, I want to start with you.
Yeah, so I have a show coming out specifically about Korea, obviously. So yeah, it'll be out like Sunday or Monday, probably our first episode. There won't be one this week. Other than that, just follow me on Twitter. Feel free to ask me any questions about Korea. I'm down to answer anything.
It's like the China Talk of Korea. It's
Final
the
Fantasy.
who's of panelists. There's an exciting panel. I won't reveal the panel yet. You want to reveal the panel?
I've already announced it on Twitter.
It's pretty exciting.
I've already announced on Twitter. So there's Go Sick Boy, which you might know by his other Twitter account, which was on in Prague. So
Prague.
that's kind of pretty
What
interesting.
the fuck?
Man Prague is on
What
the
the
show.
fuck?
I like to call him Man Prague. This is pretty hype, folks. This is going to be a great show to watch. And if nothing else, you'll get to see what Anne Prague looks like.
Yeah, and then there's Peter. He's kind of an analyst. He's worked with Heart of Storm teams, and then he's also kind of tried to get into League of Legends. And then
He's got the
there's
Hermit
Pinata.
seal of approval.
There you go.
Peter does.
That's pretty important right there.
Peter has the Hermit seal of approval.
All right.
That's all
And
you
then
need.
there's Pinata, who's our host. And that's all.
All right. I like it. I'm excited to see exactly what happens. Dentist, not Isaac or Isak.
Yeah, I have a pretty exciting project coming out on Thursday. It's called Copenhagen Wolves. We're gonna play Unicorns of Love. I have like 5 pretty good panelists with me. I got Unlimited, Freeze, Soren, Airwax, and Youngbuck. And we're gonna try to make it as exciting as possible. Yeah. Besides that, follow @WonderGameLOL on Twitter.
It's my favorite promo ever. Kelsey, I know you've been working on a lot of content for CLBC, so why don't you give CLBC a quick shout out as long as you've joined us for this last little bit.
Sure. So Chinese LOLBC is the Chinese Law Broadcasting Channel. Blame Andy for that name. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube. I just finished recording a video about LGD gaming, kind of their history, their current playstyle, and I'm going to be doing it for all the top 4 LPL teams over the next couple weeks. So for the score, which is where I actually am employed, I will be writing content, hopefully a historical Name piece, because we didn't talk about this on IEM, but the most exciting thing for me this weekend was that Name is finally out of prison and back playing LPL. So you should watch his games. Fun times.
I like how it starts off as a promo for the score and very quickly turns into a promo for Name. Just like your love for Name just converted that shout out. Name's back, people. That's what you should take away. The score is important, but more importantly, Name's back.
Well, check out the score. They have articles that are really good and stuff like that.
And of course, for Hermit, actually. Do you have any shout outs? Do you have any sponsor shout outs?
Yeah, actually I do. I'm going to shout out all of my sponsors, my team, Origin, GG. We're struggling along in the UCS. We're sponsored by Trig, Ozone, and Gaming TV. Sometimes you can see the bros streaming over there on Gaming TV. Mithy's been playing a lot of Bard recently and feeding quite a bit. I think he's now 29% win rate on Bard, and just living it up, living the lifestyle. I don't really do so it's all the exciting things that all of these people do, but follow me on Twitter. I generally have an open Ask FM day on Tuesdays, and try and get out a few hundred words at least a week. And I'm definitely open for dialogue, just like Dom said. So.
All right. Sounds great. All right, guys. So that's going to do it for us for episode 23 of Paravine Into the Rift. I hope you enjoyed all the knowledge we shared about IEM Katowice. I hope we didn't ruin the win for you, for those of you who thoroughly enjoyed the tournament. And I think we all look forward to MSI. In the meantime, follow at Paravine Network on Twitter to see when the VOD will be released. And thank you once again, everyone, so much for watching. And we'll see you next time.